Thanks for joining us, Alistair, for this short interview. I think most people watching this probably know you, but in case, what do you do for a living?
Most people don't know me. It turns out that I'm a figure from history. I'm famous for co-authoring the Agile Manifesto in 2001. And many of your audience members will have been in diapers in 2001. And what we know about historical figures is that everybody in your history books is dead, right? So my contribution is to be still alive, but people don't know. Okay, so the short thing is that I started off, I was hired by IBM in 1991 to create a methodology for their object-oriented projects in Smalltalk and C++ at the time. That was before Java. I was given unlimited airplane tickets to fly all over the world to interview teams and find out what worked and what didn't work. They were starting from a blank piece of paper. What I found was that when people followed processes, they didn't deliver software like at the level of 100%. Mm-hmm. And the people that were delivering software couldn't describe what they were doing. That was 91 to 93. Then I was on projects, wrote my books and experiences. And 10 years later, in 2001, we wrote this thing called the Agile Manifesto, which captured, and 2 years later, got my PhD on the same studies, right? Which is that people-centric methodologies do better than process-centric, technology-centric methodologies, okay? Inside of that experience, I was on some software projects, and as a matter of self-defense, invented this thing called hexagonal architecture that I'll be talking about at the conference. And so I've got this really strange mix of very technical, like hexagonal architecture for programmer thing going on, and I've got use cases as a methodology, and I've got agile and methodology stuff. So I'm mixed across the spectrum. So you can ask me a question about anything except data centers, maybe I know nothing. So that's that, and I've been self-employed since, for 30 years now. So that's me.
And you kind of lead me to the next question, because the hexagonal architecture, that's something that, like, I, in my daily life, I actually do architecture consulting, and I talk about hexagonal architecture on a daily basis almost. What I wanted to ask you is, when you wrote that in around 2005, to my knowledge, like this little article on your website, did you think it was like, that's a genuinely new thing I'm describing?
I guess I did, because I was in the patterns community from 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept waiting. So I developed it as a self-defense. I didn't know why I was developing it, but I grew up in the Smalltalk community, model view controller, all that stuff, interfaces or everything. One guy said, "Give me API or give me death," right? That was like the American Revolution kind of a phrase. And that summarizes it all. Well, I'm an application programmer. I never did the infrastructure stuff. And we had trouble. I would say, well, just let me drive it from my own tests. Like, they had to shut off the database, rebuild the whole. And I said, well, that's fine. We'll just keep going. Just let us. And they looked at me like I had three heads. Mm-hmm. That was in 1994, 5, right? So I spent years, like literally just kind of wondering, how can I know I am entitled to this, that I could swap out the database and put in my test hard. Why can't I get it? And literally kind of worked it out from first principles, and I looked at patterns and I couldn't find anything. And then I was in 2004-5, I was on a project where I finally could get someone to program it for me. We used Spring. So until I had code, I couldn't write anything down. I had code, I wrote the article, and it was completely ignored for about the next 7 or 10 years. And I went, okay, so nobody cares except me.
So that answers my next question, because did you expect to have keynote invitations around hexagonal architecture when you wrote it?
Ever. No, and I hadn't been programming for like 10 years at that point in time. So I go it's a historical artifact, okay, fine, I'll put it down. And in fact, it was the domain-driven design community. I think the book by Steve Freeman was the first one that explicitly mentioned it. And I went, wow, somebody like 10 years later, somebody noticed it. Yeah. And then for the people who do domain-driven design, this is important. It has no connection with domain-driven design.
Not at all.
You do not have to do domain-driven design, but the domain-driven design people like it because it clears the table of clutter so they can do it. So it's a precursor to domain-driven design, and then that so the DDD people have been pulling it along and made it famous, right? Just so they could do their own work.
Yeah.
So I had no idea, and I wrote the book finally about it, and I absolutely never thought there was going to be anything longer than the first article that I finally wrote in 2000. So yeah, it's been a long. If you think about this, I first started this in '94, and the book came out like in 2024 or 2023 or so. It's like, yeah, that's like 30 years of like evolution on this thing. It's a strange pattern. I totally didn't expect it.
Did you ever have a moment where you thought, oh, there's this idea I have, and like these 10 years before you wrote something down, was there a moment when you said, I've been pondering about this so long, there's no point in starting to write about it now?
No. My writing habit is I actually have a spreadsheet of like 20 books, and then the different forms. You need the PDF, you need the video, you need the Kindle, you need the course. Right? I'll never run out of work. I've got like 120 projects, to do. And even now, and it'll become relevant about AI. Like, why do we need any of these things if we have AI? I'm writing super fast these days. I'm trying to get ahead of the curve. I want my books out before they're all irrelevant, completely irrelevant. So some people will read them, 2 years from now. And the other thing is it's my books that feed the AI. ChatGPT and Claude use my writing to learn how to do the things that they advise people to do. So that actually, I need to write to feed the machine, the AI machine.
Talking about people picking up that work on hexagonal architecture and so on, since it's a lot referenced, it's part of like DDD canon teaching. When I do DDD,
which, by the way, really freaks me out. I'm so happy, but I haven't programmed professionally since like literally 1994. I mean, I do still some programming, right? Yeah. I know how it looks, I know how it smells, but I don't do it. And to see this stuff included, like in like core teaching, and this was like a side thing. I just like, hey guys, why can't I have that? And then but I'm happy because it really works. It's not difficult, and it really works, and it really saves a lot of trouble. But it is a more freaky feeling because the Agile Manifesto stuff was part of my mainline activities, right? That was a natural outgrowth of my 90s work. This was a little side thing like, hey guys, why can't I have that? Just do this, just give me this. And so that's been a happy surprise. I love it.
Are you being asked a lot about like how to understand ports and adapters? So are you often a consultant for hexagonal architecture?
I give workshops. I have not been asked to be a consultant on it. The weird thing is it's very hard to put into words. And I refuse, when I do workshops, I refuse to spend more than about 40 minutes talking about it, because you can argue on the whiteboard with arrows and boxes forever. Every word generates its own ambiguity, and people who like to avoid touching the keyboard will argue for hours and not do anything. And the first time I ran into this, I was in Brazil, and we were like 45 minutes into it and arguing. And I just said, stop, everybody, just open up the computer, make a simple app, like the hello world or category thing, get your test harness, and speed comes to zero. Speed, everything stops because it's easy to argue. But when you finally get it, it's like about 5 lines of code, 10 lines of code. And so my book starts with literally copy this code, and it's on one piece of paper, right? One page. And just all the book, 300 pages to describe, about 10 or 20 lines of code. So the words causes problems because then it allows you to ask what about. You just look at the code and you say, I could do that. Tick it, done.
Learning by doing and this.
It's just so strange. The code is so simple, but the words around the code, I've been trying, for 20 years. Yeah. And no matter what I say, people get confused. And I just go, just open up, just type it in and you'll see.
Have you sometimes been referring people to Onion architecture, Palermo, or but more clean architecture stuff?
Yeah, so apologies to everybody. It may sound egocentric, but I kind of ignore everybody else. I just follow my own thoughts, and if something occurs to me, I write about it. Now, in the case of use cases, they came from Ivar Jakobsen. I took a class from him. I had to pay attention a lot to what he was doing because I was literally describing his work. But in general, if you look at my methodology stuff, Crystal, it's not related to Scrum. It's not related. It's just like, I see the world this way and it's interesting and I describe it. And then people say, well, how does that relate to Onion? And I go, I don't know. And I wait for somebody who reads both. I let other people tell me who read both and they care about it and they do the comparisons. I go, oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You know,
I tend to boil it down to say if you want something described by just a short article on a website, go for hexagonal architecture. And if you want to read a thick book with lots of advice, and read about onion architecture, but the basic idea, inside out dependencies, is the same. Yeah, it's just more advice or less advice.
So, if we could do this, and I don't know, how much your viewers want to know this before the conference or something. Hexagonal architecture is literally like 1 or 2 decisions. And I go hard, I go really hard. And the decision is put an API on both sides of your app. Stop, end, quit. That's all I want. I don't care what you do. The outside, the inside, the relationship between, I don't care. But I go hard on give me 2 APIs and tests. End, right? And that makes it different than the onion and the clean, because they say, now we've got 5 layers here, but they don't go hard on it, right? And I say, it's a port, and it looks like this, and it has this interface, and right? So I go super hard. Now, I co-authored the book with a Spanish guy, Juan Manuel Garrido de Paz, who sadly died a month before the book came out. Literally, he was bicycling to work, had kidney failure, fell over and died on his way to work, right? So pretty good way to go. Very weird timing, right? And I let him answer all the technical questions hard because he loved to read everything. He could compare. But here's the thing. It took him 2 years to realize how little I was legislating. And he would ask me, but what about this? I go, I don't care. No, you have to care. I go, I don't care. But what about this? Not my business. Yes, but what about this? Not my business. I don't care. I don't care. Give me 2 APIs, I'm done. And then finally, I said, you go answer all the questions on Twitter. I'm not going to answer them anymore. And he started answering them and he suddenly realized, no, that's not constrained by the hexagonal architecture. Doesn't have anything to say about if you do DDD on the inside, if your adapters talk, if you've got layers, doesn't say anything about it. Just give me 2 APIs and I'm already happy. Add some tests, right? So yeah, and so I let everybody else do all the arguing. I've got some pages in the book, but not very many. There's commonality, that's good. They have much more to say about many more things. I'm just like this. In all my methodology work, I was never freaky about regression tests, automated regression tests, because my interviews were on project failure and project success in the 90s, right? And I did not see project failures from doing manual testing. Now, as iterations got shorter, it became more important to have the automated, but I didn't see project failures, right? So it's a big change for me in this hexagonal, or correctly called ports and adapters architecture. If you don't have tests, you're not in the business. What is an interface? What's a port? Well, you can draw, if you're drawing on a whiteboard, you can draw lines anywhere. Every function call is an interface. Which ones do you protect? Which ones are important? Well, when you draw lines and architectural pictures, you can do anything. The tests that you maintain define the actual interfaces that you declare are important to you. If you don't have the tests, they were never important, and I don't care. You want to make them important? Put the tests. That's why. So I come down super hard on the tests.
I think that's an oversimplification as a question, but still I challenge you. Is there any kind of favorite from the top of your head, favorite collaboration techniques and methods that you expect to work in almost any environment?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
When you say in any environment, because there are no generalizations that work. I am on record a big fan of co-located working. The ability to just say a phrase, get an answer, overhear something, add a little, facial expression, 3D, live, in person, go to the whiteboard. Nothing beats that. Nothing beats that. Okay, that's my favorite, but it's not being done. Okay. So then we do cameras always on, we do technology's your friend. The better the technology, the more you simulate being face-to-face with real-time question answer, the better thing becomes. But watch, we have all the different technologies for communication because we have needs for them. Asynchronous communication, whether it's voicemail, email, text messages, or because you can pop a question and the other person can think about it, and you can think about it and give an answer back, and you kind of kick the ball slowly forward, but it has a place. I'm not a fan of paper, but paper has a place because you can read it before you go to sleep, and then you can look at it, you can think about it, you can go over it many times, right? Every communication technique has its place, but for collaboration and co-creation, nothing beats being together.
Just because like this DDD community, which we've mentioned before, because they picked up hexagonal architecture a lot, there's also this thing about collaborative modeling going on in that space.
Yeah,
so sure. Does that ring a bell? And are there any elements of that you say align with what you prefer in team?
So, okay, now I grew up with the CRC cards from Ward Cunningham and Ken Beck, right? And they were literally index cards. You put them on the table. So we were doing collaborative modeling since forever, right, basically. And so all the variations of that are just fine. Now, my experience coding back in, 94, 95 when I was coding, we would do the CRC cards. Then I would go to the code. It didn't work like that. So I would code for a bit, but then the code started to not be clear. So I actually went back and forth between sequence diagrams, CRC cards, and code to try to find the view of this. But when you say collaborative modeling, I go, but the moment you hit the code, it doesn't operate that way anymore, right? So you really have to feel the code under your fingers as well as doing the modeling. In my first book, I took this on and I said, there are 100 models that work when we use words. You're trying to describe a domain. Cool. There are many, many, many flavors of words that all describe the domain. Not all of them have good maintenance characteristics in software when you're going to maintain them. When you end up with should be a model that works, but not every model that you speak in the air will also work in software. And that I think is fundamentally important for people who get excited about the models.
You have to test whether they actually work in real software.
It's, and then the question, what is software quality? For me, much of it is the maintainability. When what I call a trajectory of change, and this is where architecture, we're back into architecture again. Our goal is somehow that when you go to make a change, it has a limited, as kind of a damage region. The trajectory, how far out do you have to change it, right?
Blast radius,
right? So what we call a good design, besides what the performance and stuff is, that when you go to unexpected change, just, what a good happy coincidence that the trajectory of change is not too big, right? And you can't tell that you could test it a bit from talking, but then you have to type it and see it. So you go back and forth.
So I have one more that might also be overly simplistic in its assumptions. You work on and talk about what makes teams collaborate better. Talked about co-location and values and the heart of Agile. Is there anything also from the top of your head, like traits of teams that make it more pleasant to work in them?
I'm going to look at the outlier before I give the general answer. Programmers as a breed are, I won't say antisocial, but they don't like chit-chat. So they're more likely to be the kinds of people who don't want to be doing the collaborative stuff, right? And you have to take that into account in the answer, because yes, personal safety, trust, openness, all of that is great, but that may not cover the programmer community that's going to be programming. And I always, you have to have the possibility for people to go off into a quiet shell for a while to work things out, and do their magic, because that happens a lot. But in general, you want people to be open, right? And I would say more extroverted, but now we just excluded the programmer population. So we have to be really careful how we do that. Yeah, but the team's personal safety, the fact that you could say something, the fact that you could disagree with the design. We drilled ourselves in that project in 94, 95. It was an important project for me, that we would never say a design was good, that it was object-oriented. We had to say why we liked it. It has this property. So we drilled ourselves to speak in these terms, and that improved the quality of the design.
In your experience, does a pleasant work environment correlate with successful teams?
If I were to do a statistics on it, I would have to say no. If the hypothesis testing P, 0.05 kind of stuff, you can have some successful projects because you have some super duper programmers who just do magic and are otherwise really pain in the neck. You can have really wonderful things, but you've got mediocre programmers and they're going to produce a mediocre result, right? The best ones is where people, as everybody knows who's been in these situations, it's after work, somebody goes to the whiteboard and says, I have a problem. 3 people gather around and the ideas start coming like this. You break it, change it, break it, change it, break it, change it, break it, change it, right? And the thing you come up with at the end is magical. Nobody could have done that on their own, right? Doesn't happen all the time, but in the places where that happens, right, you have to have that kind of conversation. Makes the result better than any one person in the team.
So we've covered stuff you've done 30 years ago, 20 years ago, but as of now, these days, what is what are you working on?
So I'm trying to get into the AI space, obviously, like everybody, but I'm not going to become an expert on AI like Henrik Knieberg is really teaching people how to do agentic programming. I need to know it from the self-defense perspective of the team. What can you do, what can't you do, what goes away, and how does the team function? And that will be the workshop that I do before the conference. It's Heart of Agile, basically with AI. So we start off with a simple AI project just so you see how the conversations change. Now, given that that's going to advance faster than I can predict, I don't want to care about that aspect, but how did the conversation change? Who makes decisions? How does decision making change? How do you improve the quality of the team with the new conversation? Those things will stay even as the technology advances. So that'll be in the workshop, and it's the thing that I'm focusing on now. So let's talk about use cases. I asked ChatGPT 2 or 3 years ago to make a use case for me, Alistair Cockburn style. It was brilliant. It contained information I didn't put in. I could ask it, can you please split those into user stories? It could do that. I could ask it to prioritize those by business value. It could do that. I could ask it, and we've done this, to produce a hexagonal architecture in this technology to support the first couple of those user stories. It can do it. We can go to CRC card and do some models and have it looked at the text description and say, break out some objects and do some basic DDs. It can do that. So we take that as a given, and my question is, then what's left for the humans? When you can deliver in an hour, you're not actually going to deliver every hour and get feedback. The feedback cycle takes longer than the construction delivery time. So where are you getting your feedback? So this is what I'm looking at now is just tracking the AI technology just enough so I look at the organization implications, which is where I like to live.
Thank you very much. That was a pleasure for me, and I guess also for all our viewers.
Very good. Can I just put a little plug for my book at the end of this?
Please. Yes, please.
Yes. I've just come out with, so this is the Hexagonal Architecture Explained, and you'll see Juan Manuel Garrido de Paz. I could never have written this without him. He held my feet to the fire all the time. asking the questions, and he did all the technical checks. So thanks to him, the book wouldn't exist. And I came out with a preview edition in 2020, I don't know, 3, I guess, maybe. And then a year later, I updated it. So that's the new one. It's available EPUB and paper. And this will be the basis of the talk that I'll be giving at the conference. So I look forward to seeing everybody there.